Marisa Jacobs is the Managing Director at Xpatweb and heads up expatriate services. Her area of speciality includes South African work permits, particularly for employers with large groups of expatriates. So, Marisa, let's start with this, if we can, the purpose of the retired person's visa in South Africa. Tell me what it is.
In South Africa, when you want to reside in the country, you have to apply for a visa, temporary residence visa. And that visa is connected to your activity in South Africa. So if you're going to be working, you need a work visa. If you're going to be studying, you need a study visa. So the retired person visa allows you to reside in the country and you can have ad hoc activities together with that. But it really is a visa that allows you to reside in the country.
And I presume the onus is on you to prove that you are retired. You don't have to be 60 or 65. I mean, lots of people are retired at 35. Not you and I, but others.
In South Africa, we don't have a retirement age that's connected to the visa. In other countries like Mauritius, you have to be at least 55 to get a retired person visa. And there's many examples of that internationally. In South Africa, no age limit.
How long then does this visa allow one to stay in the country for?
So retired person visa in South Africa is issued for a maximum period of 4 years at a time, and then it's renewable.
And how do you go about the process of renewing it?
When you go through the process of the renewal application, you again have to prove to the Department of Home Affairs that you continue to qualify for the application, and therefore you have to put together the entire application again like you did initially. So a similar set of documents to prove to the department that you continue to qualify, and you again submit that for reconsideration, gets adjudicated, and you will get issued a new 4-year visa that can be renewed for 4 years at a time continuously unless you decide to progress to permanent residency.
Once you've got the retired person's visa, can you immediately apply then for the permanent residency documentation?
Yes, you can. There's other categories where you can't do that. For example, if you're on a work visa, you first have to reside in South Africa for a continuous period of 5 years before you can progress to permanent residency. But under retired person, the moment you've received that visa, you can progress to permanent residency.
And how difficult is that process? Do you have to jump through a lot of hoops?
There is a degree of complexity. So even though the legislation in South Africa is very welcoming and enabling in terms of retirees, for example, you don't have to have a high net worth. You don't have to purchase property in order to come into South Africa. You don't have to have a minimum age. You don't have to invest in South Africa. So it's very welcoming in terms of coming into the country. But in saying that, practically putting that together and submitting your application can be a little bit more challenging.
In terms of the retirement person's visa, and we're going to unpack some of the criteria a little bit later on, but right now as we stand, is there a long waiting list? Are there log jams? How difficult is it, and can it be frustrating?
It depends on where you submit from. So when you are submitting for a temporary residence visa in South Africa, you've never been to South Africa before, you need to submit at the South African Embassy or High Commission in your home country or your country of residence at the point of submission. You can't submit in South Africa. So depending on which country you submit from, that process can be shorter or longer, but you're looking at an average of 4 to 8 weeks for that application to be processed once you submit it. So really not too much of a long process.
But you've got to get to that embassy yourself physically.
Absolutely.
Let's make that point perfectly clear.
You must submit in person. They want to see you in person presenting your passport and your document list to that embassy. And the hard work really is in that process that leads up to you and your appointment at the embassy, making sure that you put together all the documents that are required. Unfortunately, in South Africa, our Immigration Act and regulations are quite vague. So what looks like a simple requirement, actually there's probably about 3 or 4 things that specific document needs to meet. So it really is important to have someone that guides you through that to make sure that you're ticking all the right boxes so that by the time you get to the embassy and submit, you have a smooth process. It goes in, it gets processed, your visa gets issued, and you're on your way.
What is that supporting documentation that you need?
This is where we really try to bridge that gap for the applicant. So while the legislation is very enabling and very welcoming to come in, the list of documentation and the practical process of getting your application in, processed, and your visa issued, that becomes a bit more complex. And that's where you really want to make sure that you've got a first-time accurate application. We prepare our applications in a very specific way so that it's a legally correct application, because unfortunately in South Africa we also have a very big backlog. currently standing at about 74,000, I think. What you really want to do is to make sure that you don't become part of that backlog. And to ensure that you don't become part of that backlog, the way you submit in a legally correct way is extremely important to ensure that your application progresses through those steps and you ultimately get your visa issued in the most efficient way possible.
Do people fall at the last hurdle in this respect?
Unfortunately, it is something that, because it's so vaguely written, because the embassies are not necessarily extremely helpful in terms of questions back and forth, people do find it frustrating, but they can actually have quite a smooth process if they just have the right information.
And it will be useful, you'll suggest, to purchase some form of annuity in South Africa, possibly, to hasten the process of that visa application. Explain that to me.
So we see this often, especially with applicants who are not yet withdrawing from their pension or their retirement funds. They may be, I don't want to withdraw yet, I don't need the cash yet, let it sit there for a bit more. So you don't have that clear-cut box to tick for the Department of Home Affairs. In those instances, we would suggest that you purchase an annuity. It allows the embassy to tick the box that you have this irrevocable income that's coming through every single month and to submit that in support of your application.
So you're coming into South Africa, you've cleared all of that paperwork, you've arrived, and you're starting to settle down. You're here, though, on a retirement visa. In any way, are you able to conduct business?
The easy answer is yes, you can. But you should have thought of that sooner. So you need to do that at your visa application process. So you are absolutely allowed to conduct work and you are allowed to conduct business, but it must be endorsed on your visa. So at the point of making the visa application, you need to then ask the department to please endorse work activities or business activities.
Work activities, business activities. Break that down for me. I don't understand the difference.
Business would be you own your own business, or you have invested in a business and you're going to be a shareholder, you're a director of that business, and you're going to be involved in the business activities.
Right.
Work is there some kind of employment arrangement.
You're going to get a salary or a wage.
I must stress that this is not full-time work. If you're going to be fully employed doing a full-time work, you need a work visa. So on a retired visa, you can get authorization for ad hoc work.
Are there downsides to that? What do people have to watch out for? Where would they typically make mistakes? Where are the transgressions there?
You need to get advice on this because there's a thin line. If you are going to work for a company in South Africa, you're getting a full-time employment contract, you really need to start looking at a different visa category. But there are instances where work under retired visa will be more than sufficient and you would meet those thresholds.
Marisa, let's return now to time spent in the country. So you've gone through all the rigmarole of getting the documentation, you've settled, you might or might not be working in one way or another. Now you're starting to think of citizenship. Is that difficult? What's the process there?
Your first step is going to be to get the retired person visa done, checked in the country. Then you're going to want to progress to permanent residency. You submit that application, you wait your 6 to 12 months, you've got your permanent residency permit. So after you've had your permanent residency for 5 years, you would then be eligible for citizenship.
Now, what does that entail?
It's an application that needs to be put together. It gets submitted directly to the Department of Home Affairs. They would look at the application and issue you with South African citizenship. Similar to other countries, there would be a pledge and you'd then become a South African citizen. You can then apply for a South African passport. Important to note that in the 3 years preceding your application for citizenship, you cannot have left the country for more than 90 consecutive days to remain eligible.
You've forgotten the most important one, you know that. That's listing the entire squad of the World Cup winning rugby team. Because if you can't get that right, then you must go back.
It will be frowned upon.
Are there certain countries that South Africa looks on less favorably than others in terms of processing that documentation? It's tricky, but I think that people need to be aware of it. I'm not asking you if there's a list, but is there a list?
No, there is no list. So South Africa has a wonderful constitution where no nationality is looked upon differently. It is an open country. Every nationality is welcomed. We see lots of example on the global visas that we do, that there are certain countries that really their nationals struggle to get visas. In South Africa, that's not an issue. We do see certain embassies that are less efficient than others, so it might take longer for the visa to be processed, but that's not a nationality issue. That's really just a embassy efficiency
It's a
issue.
bureaucracy issue. Let's assume then that you've settled that the citizenship issue 10 years down the line, but you're starting to establish yourself in South Africa now. You've bought a dog, for instance. Is there a minimum number of days that you must stay in South Africa to retain that retired person's visa? I think you alluded to it, but just refresh my memory.
In South Africa, not. Again, when you look at a lot of these residency by investment programs, residency by property, on many of them, you have to actually physically relocate and reside in the country in order to reap the benefits of those visas and permits. In South Africa, it's not necessary. So we see a lot of our clients who actually do the swallow thing, live in South Africa during the beautiful summer months and then go back to Europe during their summer periods.
I want to be one of those people.
You and me both.
Let's talk about property ownership if we can. Again, this is going to be the subject of another podcast in more detail down the line. But what are the rules and regulations regarding property ownership?
A beautiful benefit in terms of South Africa. There's a lot of countries where, as a foreign national, you cannot own property outright. In South Africa, you absolutely can. You can purchase property. You can bring in your funds to purchase that property. If you wanted to take advantage of great interest rates that we have in South Africa, you can get up to a 50% bond as a visa holder. Once you get permanent residency, you could get a 100% bond, and you're also free to buy property wherever. If we look at Mauritius, for example, they zone. Foreign nationals are only allowed to purchase property in certain areas.
Oh, I didn't know that.
You don't have the freedom of buying wherever you like. There's certain development areas where you purchase. It's then often very expensive and quite small properties, whereas in South Africa, you can...
Wherever you want to go. We've been talking about single individuals, haven't we? But what about spouses and children? Are they allowed to accompany the main visa holder, or do they need to go through the entire process themselves?
Yes, family can come with. The main applicant would be able to bring their spouse with. The spouse would apply for an accompanying spouse visa. In our Immigration Act, it's called a visitor visa, which is issued for 3 years at a time. So unfortunately, just short of that 4-year period that the main applicant would get, but again, renewable in South Africa. And then any dependents that come with would be able to apply for accompanying children visas. No limit on how many accompanying children can come with. And then any children that are of school-going age would apply for a study visa.
Let's return to money if we can. I think you mentioned about the equivalent amount of in US dollars that you've got to receive monthly to meet the retired person's visa financial requirement. But more importantly than that, talk to us a little bit about bringing money in, the process, the declaration, and how difficult it is.
Even in the preparation stages of you putting together your visa application, you don't have your visa yet, you would already be able to open a bank account in South Africa as a non-resident to help you to facilitate some of those money flowing in. We see that a lot with our clients where they will, in the months leading up to applying for the visa, they'll come and visit the country quite often, see how it is. The idea of relocating often spurts from those visits, and oftentimes they'll maybe find a property already at that point and then decide to do the visa application. So you'd be able to open a bank account as a non-resident, bring your funds into South Africa. We have exchange control in South Africa, so it's quite important that you bring it in under the right coding. You would then convert it to local currency where you'll be able to use it. And then once your visa is issued, you would then open a full-fledged South African bank account for your day-to-day use. But yes, quite easy to bring money in. Just a bit of tricks and tips that I would suggest you get acquainted with before you do so that you make sure you do it correctly so that you can easily externalize again.
Marisa, as we come to the end of this conversation, we've focused a lot on process, on procedure, on where the difficulties might be. But I just want to spend a moment or two dwelling on the human side of all of this. You process a lot of this. What are the typical fears and concerns that people have? What are they worried about? And how do you allay those fears for them?
The two major fears that I see all the time is the one is around, is my application going to be successful? We hear a lot of stories around applications being rejected. I've gone through all of this trouble. I've purchased a property. I've sort of set up what I want to do in South Africa, and now my visa application is unsuccessful.
And it's normally procedural. The documentation is not right. It's not as though South Africa doesn't want you to come.
There's a clear fix for that. Be well prepared. Make sure you understand the document requirement. Our focus really sits around first time correct application. You don't need the stress of having a rejection first and then going, why was this? Oh, I'll just change this document. Let me start over again. Then something else pops up. So really well planned. Then you won't sit with the headache around a rejection. And then the second part that guys are quite nervous about is how long is it going to take? That is something that can be quite unpredictable, but again, depending on where you're submitting, we can give quite a clear line in terms of how long it's going to take to allow you to plan that out. Even if it is just, you know that it's going to take 3 months, so you know you can plan for that 3 months of the processing time.
Marisa Jacobs, that's where we're going to leave this discussion, and I'm going to invite you to join us again for further episodes as we look at those processes and protocols for retiring and resettling in South Africa. And next time, and we mentioned it on this podcast, but it is important, you got to have a place to live. So we're going to look at the property market in South Africa and the ins and outs of ownership. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.